Imagine the kindest person you know, the one who would give without expecting anything in return, the one who stands up for the weak and treats every soul with compassion. Now, imagine watching that person slowly change. The warmth in their smile begins to fade. Their words, once gentle and full of care, start to cut like knives. And one day, you realize they are capable of cruelty, of lies, of destruction. It doesn't happen in an instant. There is no dramatic moment when the good version of them disappears. The change comes slowly, so slowly that at first you barely notice it. A small compromise here, a quiet justification there. But each step takes them further from the person they once were, until suddenly, they have crossed a line they once swore they would never approach. You might think this could never happen to you. You might believe that your morals are stronger, your principles unshakable, that you are immune to the corruption that overtakes others. But history tells a different story. Because under the right conditions, anyone, no matter how pure, how righteous, how loving, can fall. Not because they were born bad, but because the forces that change people work slowly, invisibly, until it's too late. And here is the most chilling part. Most people never even realize they are changing until they have already become the very thing they once despised. The uncomfortable truth is that none of us are immune. The line between good and evil is not a wall that some people stand behind while others are trapped on the wrong side. It runs directly through every human heart. Psychologists like Philip Zimbardo, through the infamous Stanford prison experiment, have shown how quickly ordinary people can be transformed into perpetrators of cruelty when placed in the right environment. Stanley Milgram's obedience experiments revealed something equally unsettling: that a majority of participants would inflict what they believed to be serious harm on another person simply because an authority figure told them to. These findings strip away the illusion of moral invincibility. They reveal that morality is fragile, not fixed. That good intentions alone are not enough to protect us from the pull of darkness. And the most dangerous part? We often don't see the change as it's happening. We tell ourselves that we're still the same person, still on the side of good, even as our actions begin to tell a different story. This is the shadow that follows us all, a reminder that the potential for both compassion and cruelty lives within us. The question is not whether you are capable of falling into darkness. The question is, what would it take to make you take the first step? The first step in the transformation is almost invisible. It's the slow erosion of moral boundaries, a quiet, steady wearing down of the lines we swore we'd never cross. It never begins with something shocking or unforgivable. It begins with the smallest of compromises, a harmless white lie to avoid trouble, a tiny bending of the rules for what feels like a good cause, a moment when we tell ourselves, this isn't really wrong. Not in this situation. At first, it feels justified, maybe even noble. You're helping someone, avoiding unnecessary conflict, or acting out of necessity. But the human mind has a dangerous habit. Once we've crossed one moral line, the next one doesn't seem quite as far. The act that once felt unthinkable now feels reasonable. And with each step, the distance between who we are and who we once were grows. Psychologists call this the slippery slope effect. You may start by breaking your own rules in small ways, believing you'll never go further. But over time, each compromise rewrites your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who never does wrong, and instead as someone who occasionally bends the truth, or looks the other way, or does what's necessary. And when that shift happens, the descent accelerates. What makes this process so dangerous is that it's easy to miss. The changes are so gradual that you can convince yourself you haven't really changed at all. You tell yourself you'd still never do anything truly bad. But the reality is this: morality doesn't usually shatter in a single moment. It crumbles piece by piece, until one day there's nothing left to hold the structure up. If the slow erosion of morality is the quiet pull toward darkness, the power of obedience is the force that shoves people over the edge. It is one of the most unsettling truths about human nature. We are far more willing to follow orders than we like to admit, even when those orders go against everything we believe in. In the 1960s, psychologist Stanley Milgram set out to understand why ordinary people in history had committed horrific acts simply because they were told to. In his now infamous experiment, participants were instructed to deliver what they believed were painful, even dangerous electric shocks to another person. The shocking result? The majority obeyed, continuing to inflict harm simply because an authority figure told them it was necessary. They weren't acting out of hatred or cruelty. Many of them showed signs of distress, but they obeyed anyway. Why? Because obedience offers something deceptively comforting: the illusion that we are not responsible for our actions. "I was just following orders" becomes a shield for the conscience. It allows people to surrender their moral compass to someone else's command. The terrifying truth is that this isn't just a relic of the past. It happens today, in workplaces, in institutions, in everyday life. The uniform may change, the orders may be less extreme, but the psychology remains the same. When we let authority dictate our morality, we stop thinking for ourselves. And when that happens, we open the door for someone else's darkness to take root inside us. If obedience allows us to hand over our morality to authority, group identity gives us permission to redraw the boundaries of who deserves our compassion. Humans are tribal by nature. We crave belonging, and we find comfort in those who think, act, and believe as we do. But that same instinct can become a weapon when it transforms into us versus them. When we bind ourselves too tightly to a group, whether political, religious, social, or ideological, we begin to see those outside the group not just as different, but as wrong, as dangerous, as less than human. And once someone is stripped of their humanity in our eyes, the moral restraints that keep cruelty in check begin to collapse. History is full of atrocities committed not by sadists or psychopaths, but by ordinary people who believed they were protecting their side from a dehumanized enemy. Propaganda, slogans, and stereotypes turn people into symbols that no longer evoke empathy, only fear or contempt. This is why armies are trained to see the enemy as targets, not as fathers, mothers, or children. It's why political debates so easily turn vicious, because each side begins to see the other not as human beings, but as obstacles to be removed. And it doesn't only happen on a global stage. It happens in schools, in workplaces, in online spaces. It happens anytime we decide that someone's pain matters less simply because they are not one of us. And once we stop seeing others as human, we can justify almost anything we do to them. Perhaps the most dangerous step in the descent is that most people never see themselves as villains. Even in the midst of causing harm, they tell themselves they are still good, still righteous, still fighting for the right cause. This is the power of self-justification, the mental sleight of hand that allows us to rewrite the story so that we remain the hero, no matter what we do. Psychologist Leon Festinger called it cognitive dissonance, the discomfort we feel when our actions clash with our beliefs. Instead of changing the harmful action, we often change the belief to match it. We tell ourselves, "I had no choice, they deserved it, this is for the greater good." The more we repeat these justifications, the more we silence the small inner voice warning us we've crossed a line. And then comes moral licensing, the strange phenomenon where believing we are good actually gives us permission to do bad things. A person who donates to charity in the morning might feel less guilty about lying in the afternoon. A leader who sees themselves as a champion of justice might feel justified in silencing anyone who disagrees. The irony is cruel. The more convinced we are of our own righteousness, the more blind we become to our own moral failures. History's darkest chapters are filled not with people who thought they were evil, but with people utterly convinced they were on the right side. When we believe our cause is pure, anything can be justified in its defense. And that is when the final safeguard, our empathy, begins to die. Empathy is the final barrier between a good person and a monster. It is the thread that keeps cruelty in check, the ability to feel another's pain as if it were your own. But once that thread is cut, anything becomes possible. Losing empathy rarely happens all at once. It begins with emotional distance, with small acts of detachment. We stop listening to someone's story. We stop picturing them as a human being with fears and dreams. Slowly, their suffering becomes abstract, something we can think about without feeling. This is why propaganda works so well. It doesn't need to convince you to hate. It only needs to convince you not to care. Soldiers are trained to see the enemy as targets, not as people. Online, anonymity allows us to say things we would never say to a person's face, because in that moment, they are not a person to us, just a screen name. In workplaces, we can justify undermining a colleague because we've reduced them to a label: lazy, incompetent, undeserving. And the moment someone is no longer fully human in our eyes, the moral restraints collapse. Cruelty stops feeling like cruelty. It feels like justice, or necessity, or even nothing at all. This is the final stage of the descent, when the absence of empathy allows us to do things we once believed we were incapable of. Beneath every step in this transformation, from small compromises to obedience, from dehumanization to the loss of empathy, there is one force that fuels it all: the environment we live in. More than personal weakness, more than any hidden flaw in our character, it is the systems, cultures, and influences around us that shape who we become. No one is born a monster, and no one stays pure simply by willpower alone. We are molded, sometimes gently, sometimes violently, by the world that surrounds us. Philip Zimbardo called it the Lucifer effect, the process by which ordinary people commit extraordinary evil, not because they are inherently bad, but because their environment slowly warps their sense of right and wrong. In a workplace where dishonesty is normal, lies become routine. In a society where cruelty is rewarded, kindness begins to look like weakness. In a culture that prizes victory over integrity, we learn to see integrity as optional. This is why no one can afford to be complacent. It's not enough to simply believe we are good people. If the space we inhabit rewards moral decay, it will, in time, pull us down with it. And yet, the opposite is also true. The right environment can protect us, strengthen us, and hold us accountable when we begin to drift. Which means the question is no longer just, what kind of person are you? But, what kind of world are you letting shape you? If good people can turn into monsters, the most urgent question becomes, how do we stop it? The first safeguard is self-awareness. Many believe they're immune to corruption simply because they see themselves as good. But that belief is dangerous, because the moment you think you could never fall, you stop watching your step. True self-awareness means recognizing that under the right pressures, in the right circumstances, anyone can be led astray. It means regularly questioning your own actions, your motives, and the stories you tell yourself to justify them. The second safeguard is moral courage. It's easy to do the right thing when it costs nothing. The real test comes when doing the right thing risks your comfort, your status, or your security. History remembers those who stood firm against corruption, even when they stood alone, but it also remembers how many chose silence instead. Courage isn't built in a single moment. It's strengthened through small, daily acts of integrity. Every time you refuse to bend your values for convenience, you reinforce the strength to stand when it truly matters. The third safeguard is empathy. Every force that turns good people into monsters works by shrinking our capacity to see others as human. Empathy reverses that process. It is harder to harm someone when you have looked into their eyes, heard their story, and felt their pain. Even brief moments of connection can break through the walls of prejudice and hostility. If we want to resist the slide into cruelty, we must protect our ability to see the humanity in everyone, even those we disagree with, even those we fear. The battle between good and evil is not some distant war fought by strangers in faraway places. It happens here, inside us, every single day. It lives in the small choices we make, in the justifications we whisper to ourselves, in the way we treat those who can do nothing for us. And every choice moves us, either toward the light or toward the darkness. The philosopher Alexander Solzhenitsyn once wrote, "The line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being." There are no pure saints, and there are no absolute monsters. Only people, shaped by their surroundings, their decisions, and their willingness to face the darkness within themselves. So ask yourself, who are you becoming? Are you guarding your integrity, or are you letting small compromises slowly erode it? Are you shaping the environment around you, or is it shaping you? Because in the end, the difference between a good person and a monster is not fate. It is choice, and that choice is yours to make, today, tomorrow, and for the rest of your life.